Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to everyone who has joined us online. Welcome to those who have joined us on UWI Open Campus's Facebook page, as well as those who have joined us on YouTube. This evening, we have yet another cross-country dialogue in collaboration with Pink Parliament and the Women and Development Units, University of West Indies Open Campus. This is the fourth cross-country dialogue that we're having um, with members of parliament or ministers or politicians from across the Caribbean and the wider world, where we engage in conversations with members of Pink Parliament, so to speak, um, to address various issues relating to their experiences as politicians and various issues in different thematic areas. So the theme for today is breaking barriers to lead to youth leadership in Caribbean politics. And we are joined by the Honorable Minister Deanne Cantis from the government of Anguilla. And we are really pleased to have her here this evening. And she is our third politician from the region that we're going to be having a conversation with. And we're really pleased to have her here because one of the things that I have noticed is that the up and coming, emerging, current generation of politicians that are entering politics, that are engaging in political leadership, are not career politicians. They are persons who have their own careers and then enter politics. So I think once again, it is refreshing to see yet another person, in this case, a barrister, an attorney at law who has entered politics from Anguilla. So in terms of looking at what WAND and Pink Parliament does in this partnership, WAND, as you know, is the Women and Development Unit of the University of the West Indies Open Campus, and we engage in technical partnerships, online learning, and applied research that center women and their families in Caribbean development. So the partnership with Pink Parliament fits within that scope, and it is a partnership with Pink Parliament for the last 3 years, I believe. And we're happy once again to work with Pink Parliament to put on this cross-country dialogue. I'm not going to take too long. We are joined by several Pink parliamentarians from the current cohort as well as cohorts before. And I'd like to welcome you all this evening. We're joined by the minister, and our moderator this evening will be Ayanna Robinson from the current cohort of Pink Parliament. And what I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about Ayanna, who will moderate this evening's session with the minister. Ayanna Robinson is a Barbadian with a passion for public speaking, advocacy, and philanthropy. She's also a polyglot, and she studies French and Spanish in school and researches linguistics. Ayanna is an upward six student at Queen's College, where she has been president of the Literary and Debating Society for the past 2 years. She is also an independent senator in the Barbados National Youth Parliament under the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Empowerment. Ayanna is a Pink Parliamentarian in the Pink Parliament Pink Parliament Barbados, which is a joint initiative by Life in Leggings and the Barbados Youth Development Council. Due to Ayanna's interest in advocacy, she's thinking about pursuing a career in law. So Ayanna, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. As Taito would have said, thank you to all of you who are joining us this evening on the various platforms, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. So this evening, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker for this evening, the Honorable Deanne Cantis-Rogers, Minister of Education and Social Development in Anguilla. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her. So Deanne Cantis-Rogers won her seat in 2020 against the then Premier, becoming the MP for Valley South, and was subsequently appointed as the youngest cabinet minister in Anguillian history. Her current portfolio spans across social development and education, including youth, culture, sports, probation services, and gender affairs. Acknowledging that the future is secured by the sacrifices and investments we make today, the minister has set out to revolutionize the education system, focusing on retooling teachers, refocusing on how to learn rather than what to learn in a constantly evolving and hyper-connected global environment, and creating a culture change that empowers all stakeholders in the education sector. The minister comes from a mixed background of educators, lawyers, and farmers. A lawyer by profession, Ms. Cantis Rogers was called to the bar of England and Wales in 2018, while simultaneously becoming the first Black woman to be crowned Miss Universe Britain. She was also Anguilla's first heptathlete, representing Anguilla regionally and internationally at the Central America and the Caribbean Championships and the Commonwealth Games. She supports nonprofit organizations that facilitate psychosocial support in the Anguillan community, preventative care for NCDs, and cancer treatment to those in need across the region. Her most ardent work has been partnering as an ambassador with A Sisterhood, a nonprofit organization that raises money for victims of acid attacks, female genital mutilation, and domestic violence. She is also the CEO of the Fresh Air Project, a nonprofit organization that focuses on equipping young people with the tools to become co-creators of their futures by reframing perspectives to see challenges as opportunities. So now I'm just gonna hand over to the Honorable Minister, Deanne Cantis Rogers, to just speak to us a little bit.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Ayanna, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to Taitu, the Pink Parliament and UWI Open Campus for having me this evening. Just to give a little background, Ayanna has touched on most of my accomplishments thus far in my career. But as Taitu said, I stepped into this role as a politician without any plans of being a career politician. In fact, between the decision to run for politics and when I actually was elected was a very short time span of 10 months, which is probably a record for very short campaigning periods in Anguilla specifically. And historically speaking, that's not the way politicians came about. They campaigned for a number of years before they were successful in office. So in relation to my political career, there have been a number of anomalies that have been identified from the time span to being able to successfully defeat the incumbent premier at the time in his seat, which he has had for in excess of 36 years. There were a number of anomalies, but I do say, and I stand very firm to the belief that timing is everything. And you can do anything you put your mind to. So my life and my career in law, moving from the United Kingdom and coming down to Anguilla, the decision to run for politics was one that was quite both emotionally led and almost like a call to duty. One of the questions that was constantly thrown at me before my decision to enter into the political arena was, if not you, then who? And believe it or not, I did search for alternatives to myself initially. I went to my colleagues, to my classmates. I asked them if they were interested in putting themselves forward. And they, in response, asked me why I was asking and why wasn't I doing? And for me, that was a life-changing moment, because in terms of putting yourself forward for political office, it can be a very vulnerable moment, but it is also one that is strengthened by the support of your colleagues and the support and encouragement of those who believe in you. And so my journey really was cemented through the support of those around me. And as much as we sometimes think that our successes can be based on our own achievements, really and truly, I am here in this position today because of the trust and support of my constituents, my colleagues, my family, and my country. So I'm very pleased to be here this evening to have this conversation, this cross-country dialogue, and I'm very excited for the discussion to ensue.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think that your words definitely show the passion that you have for your career as a politician. Also, how you spoke about how you looked at other people and you didn't outsource yourself, and the importance of a community, and it's not something that you can do for yourself, which I think is very important for all the pink parliamentarians here to remember as we start to embark on our journeys as we begin our careers in politics. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. So now we're going to go into the interview segment. So I'm just gonna ask you a few questions about your career as a politician. So my first question, since Anguilla achieved the right to universal adult suffrage in 1952, women have been able to become members of parliament. Over the 70-year period, you are one of only 7 women to become duly elected members of parliament in Anguilla. Can you tell me about your experience as a female parliamentarian in Anguilla?
So what I'll begin with is the fact that the presence of female parliamentarians is related to the willingness of the electorate to be led by women, to respect women in a position of leadership, and to organize effectively around female candidates in their bid for office. That is also supplemented by the education and sensitization of women so that they, and girls, so that they know that they can take up roles in parliament. And that there's a saying, you cannot be what you cannot see, and that's really true. You have to be in that position to be able to point directly to young women taking up office in that role. And that's why I think programs such as the Pink Parliament are so fundamental and important. And in my experience as a parliamentarian, I've had, of course, my challenges. In Anguilla, we sit as parliamentarians and as members of cabinet. And sometimes it can be tricky to balance the two roles because they do on occasion require different answers for the same question. And in every parliamentarian's life, you will be faced with a number of serious dilemmas. And of course, COVID-19 has provided the challenge of all challenges to parliamentarians at this time as we look to see how we redeploy resources, what are the areas that we focus on as priorities for the advancement of our people during this really, really trying times as resources and revenues decline. And there have been moments where in relation to a number of bills that were brought to Parliament, or to a specific bill that was brought to Parliament, I was in a position to vote against a government bill, even as a part of government. And that is not a normal thing. But ultimately, I decided that I was in this place at this time, in this position that you see me sitting in right here, not on my own strength, but partially because my constituents had entrusted me to be a conduit for their voices. And so I had taken that opportunity to become that conduit to their voices, even though it was not the same position taken by my government. So those are challenges that parliamentarians face, and that is one specific challenge that I faced. But I've also had my successes, and like the passing of the Child Justice Act, which was fundamental to creating a system of justice specifically for young people that was not focusing totally on the punitive element. Of course, punitive elements will always be there, but it was already also about rehabilitating our young people so that they can reintegrate into our society successfully. So during my time as a female parliamentarian, or a parliamentarian generally, I would say that I've had both highs and lows, but I have learned how to navigate those highs and lows much more successfully now.
Okay, thank you very much for that response. I really like how you spoke about representation and the importance of it, not only in terms of people having an example if they want to get into politics, but also the fact that politicians are representing people. And I also like that you touched a little bit on the challenges that a politician will face, almost as if sometimes I feel like we see these people and we forget that they're human beings. So I think it's very important to humanize them and recognize the challenges that they're facing and the dilemmas you might face, like such as you said, when you didn't know if you would vote yes or no on the bill, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. So we're on to our second question. So before entering politics, you were an athlete and participated at the Crifty Games and the Commonwealth Games. Then you were Miss Anguilla and later Miss Universe Britain. What did you learn in these spheres of life that would have prepared you to become a politician?
Thank you for that question, Ayanna. It's probably one of the questions I get a lot due to the very extreme nature and the shift between each of those roles, from athlete to Miss Anguilla in pageantry, and then to law, and now to politics. But one thing that has remained very constant through each and every one of those areas is that preparation is key. And you have to understand, based on whatever allotted time you have, how to prepare most effectively. So it's also partly strategy. I live by the saying, proper preparation prevents poor performance. And even when you don't have a lot of time, you have to be very efficient with how you use your resources and how you prepare yourself for a specific role, whether that's as an athlete or as a pageant queen, or even in law. So preparation is key. That's number one. But it has also prepared me for life as a politician, because I have to do a lot of public speaking. And as someone who participated in pageantry, interview sections, introductions, being able to talk and network with other people, that's a critical skill that I've developed during my time as a beauty queen, and as also during my time as a lawyer. So those skills have been very, very transferable right now as a politician, because you have to learn how to speak on matters in relation to my ministry specifically, but also to my constituents when I'm representing them and advocating for them. I have to be able to use my public speaking skills. It's also prepared me in terms of people skills. So public speaking on one side, and then you have people skills on another. And when you're an athlete competing at that level, you are exposed to a number of different persons of different ethnicities. You have to speak to large swaths of people, you make friends, and it's the same thing happens also in pageantry. But those skills and being comfortable around people and being able to talk with people and listen is probably one of the skills I hope politicians will hold very close to their hearts, so that they can execute their roles as representatives very well, because you have to hear what people say in order to represent them. And so finally, during my time at the Bar of England and Wales, of course, we would have done quite a bit in terms of examining and scrutinizing government policies and statutes. And so that has given me quite a bit of experience as in my role as a parliamentarian, on one hand, dealing with legislation, and on the other hand, as a member of the Executive Council, which is responsible for dealing with policies and day-to-day operations in government.
Thank you very much for that response. I love how you spoke about how you benefited from each of the areas separately, because I think it could be very easy for somebody to look at your background and say, okay, what does she know about politics? Why is she coming here after all of this? And to show that not only as politicians, but as women, that people can be versatile and use all these different skills. So like you said, preparation, like you said, public speaking, and also touching on the importance of interpersonal skills as you seek to represent people. So thank you very much for that response. So for the third question, during your tenure as Miss Universe Britain, you spoke out on female genital mutilation and acid attacks. Since acquiring your ministerial role, you have not been silenced as it relates to violence against women, citing at the end of 2021 that domestic violence cases have risen by 125%. What role do you think politicians should play in the achievement of gender equality?
So politicians, when they function in their roles, function in a myriad of ways. You function in your personal capacity and your professional capacity. And this is whether or not you are a male or a female. So I know when we speak about gender equality, sometimes we can think that we're only referring to women's rights, but we're also referring to our young men. And when we step into the arena of being a politician as a young man or a young woman, we are in a position to advocate for mental health support for our young men, because we do know that there's a higher suicide rate for young men than there is for young women. We have a position and a platform with which to advocate against the attrition rate for young boys in schools, because we understand that even as it relates to tertiary education and even secondary education, we have a higher dropout rate in terms of our young boys and a higher level of disengagement with our young boys. So when we're talking about gender equality, it is a multidimensional issue. And for me, it has always been multidimensional, as I said, because when I'm assuming my role and when I'm stepping in as a minister of government or a parliamentarian, I am assuming my role and also playing my part with gender equality and gender parity, because by stepping into this arena and saying that I am going to be a politician, that I am going to step in as a representative, I am saying that I am not going to be daunted or offended by persons infantilizing me because I'm young, or the stereotypes that they attach to me because I am a woman, and not allowing that to define my choice to engage in politics. Because at the end of the day, it is my agency. It is the question of whether I want to engage in my freedom of choice that is allowing me to stay here and to step into this role. And so that is a very important, I think that's an important aspect of how I play my part as a politician in terms of gender equality, breaking down those stereotypes and showing that I can do this job in the way that only a woman can. And I think that is a very powerful personal testimony for female politicians all over the world to hang on to and to continue. But also in my role as a policymaker, there's an aspect to what role do I play as a policymaker in terms of the achievement of gender equality. And I have the opportunity, based on my position, to influence policies. So the gender affairs policy that we're currently finalizing, I am here now, and I'm given the opportunity to pursue that to the end, because it is a priority for me, and it has been a priority from the campaign, and it's something that my constituents heard me say is a priority. So there is a lot of importance in terms of politicians playing their role in achieving gender equality, both for men and for women in the Caribbean region. And we also know that gender equality also deals with aspects of domestic violence. Like you said earlier, I am an advocate for women who have been the victims of acid attacks and female genital mutilation and domestic violence. And all of these are acts that are committed against them. And in order to continue to advocate and to continue to put myself in a position to be a voice for others, I have to step into this role as a politician and a policymaker. So I think it's very important for politicians to bring the electorate along in their goals for gender equality, whether they are a man or a woman, and to ensure that if they want to guarantee a better quality of life for their people, that they understand that guaranteeing a better quality of life for their people involves both men and women. And a better quality of life also means making sure that women are safe in their communities, because you can't have a flourishing economy and society if people feel unsafe. So I think there are a lot of roles that politicians can play in gender equality.
Okay, thank you very much for addressing how widespread an issue gender discrimination is and how it affects so many different areas of life. So you would have outlined that affects men as well as women, which I think is very important, because like you would have said, we can easily exclude men from this conversation and forget the suffering that they face, as well as saying how we truly can't have a good economy or a successful economy when these people feel unsafe. And as you would have stated that you can do your job in the way that only a woman can, I think it's really important that you address the fact that issues like gender discrimination, that we can't conquer them without taking action. I think that's why we have to be so grateful to persons such as yourself who are taking action, like you said, as an advocate, as a policymaker, and to represent people. So thank you for that. So we're going to our next question, which you kind of addressed earlier, but I'll still ask it. One of your major achievements since becoming the Minister of Education and Social Development in Anguilla was your passing of the Child Justice Act. Why do you view criminal law reform and child justice as such crucial issues?
So the Child Justice Act was passed on July the 1st, 2021. And that was one of the issues that I campaigned against very heavily during the 2019-2020 elections. And part of the rationale for campaigning that heavily, and one of the lines that I stated very early in my bid to office, was that the first time a child makes a mistake, the response cannot be the courthouse. That's not the appropriate response, because it has already indicated that there's been failures in our communities in terms of preventing young people from getting to that stage. So the Criminal Justice Act has always been very close to my heart, and social justice has also been very close to my heart. And when I speak about child justice and criminal law reform, we've spoken at length about nonviolent offenses, especially, and things that are becoming very popular within the Caribbean region. For instance, the possession of marijuana, and how the criminal law responds to those particular incidents and acts. And the reason why I took the stance I did in terms of pushing the Child Justice Act was because even when we have a behavior, let's just say, that is not necessarily something that we would encourage, our response is having a disproportionate effect on our young people's ability to become citizens, to become to become very active within society, to reintegrate into society. And that's because when that child steps out of the prison with a criminal record, then we are looking at them being unable to travel, them being unable to attend tertiary institutions, them being unable to hold a job. And all of those things have a cyclical effect, because if they are frustrated when trying to reintegrate into our communities, it is more likely that they'll feel more accepted and get a better sense of belonging by recidivism, by going back to the same things you were trying to prevent them from doing again. So instead of actually changing the behavior of our young people, we're actually excluding them from participating in our society. And that is why criminal law and criminal justice reform was such critical issues. But it went beyond that, about recidivism. it also went to what is the response that our criminal justice system has towards young people. So who is the first contact our young people have when there's an issue in terms of a nonviolent offense? Who is the first contact? What is the response that they have? Are they taken straight to the court? Do they have someone to interface with them, to intervene? What is the focus in terms of rehabilitating our young people so that they don't feel abandoned all through the process? And those are the reasons why I took them to be such critical issues, and to focus on them and to push to see the Criminal Justice Act, the Child Justice Act specifically, being passed in July 2021.
Thank you. I like how you spoke about the fact that in the Caribbean, we oftentimes forget about prevention. We wait until somebody has actually committed the crime to then figure out everything they did wrong and what shouldn't have been done. And I love the fact that you spoke about how people are excluded from the society afterwards, which would not actually help the issue instead of rehabilitating them or helping them to get back into the society. I remember I was in a session last year with a man from Barbados who was in prison. And he's actually an author, and he won an award in Canada, and he couldn't travel to Canada to accept the award because he was in prison. So I think it's very important that we really start to engage with these persons and really help them to reintegrate into the society and truly give them a second chance, since we failed them in the start. So thank you for outlining that, and thank you for your work in that area. So for the next question, having defeated the incumbent Premier Victor Banks, who held an assembly seat for over 30 years, served as the Minister of Education and Social Development, and even served as acting Premier for 10 days last year, you have cemented yourself as a young female leader in politics. What steps do you recommend that other young women take in order to become involved in politics?
That's a good question. What I would say to young women who are interested in getting involved in politics is to tune in, number one. So start listening, start hearing how the discourse is handled when politicians are talking about specific topics, especially ones that are pretty controversial within the community, because those are really the ones that the electorate gets fired up about. And it's very interesting to hear both sides of each argument. So number one is to tune in. Number two, I would always advocate for young women who are interested in getting involved in politics to get themselves involved in some type of civil society group. And the reason for that is you're able to see how you can build change from the ground up. A lot of politicians, they come from the top down and they look to create change from the top, but change from the bottom is also equally important. And if you can have some hands-on experience in creating change from the bottom up, then it equips you very well to say how those top-down responses are deficient or need support, or how you can make suggestions to your representatives as to how their solutions can be better. And once you get practice in doing things like that, you are well on your way to being prepared to be a politician, because it's all about choice, making the best choices, making the most informed choices. And once you have that experience, it'll be very useful. But also in terms of getting active in politics, if there's a specific ministry or area that you're interested in, ask the minister who's sitting in that role if whether or not they'd be interested in letting you shadow. I think it's a very important process. I've had a shadow with me previously, and she enjoyed the time that we spent going through the Ministry of Social Development and Education, and it allowed her to understand whether or not this was something that she was actually interested in, or whether or not she was interested in another ministry. And I think that's also important, because you also want to know where you're heading and what is best suited to you. So those are some things that I would definitely recommend to young women who are interested in getting involved in politics. And also, I would say, if you are, I think the Pink Parliament really stands as a shining example of how you prepare yourself for political office by actually getting the training necessary to make representations, to look at bills. So whether or not it's the Pink Parliament, or it's your debating society, or it's your country's youth parliament or youth council, I'd say get involved in those groups as well, because they are very well linked with government offices and government ministries, and you're able to see from a first-hand account exactly how you can make a difference.
Thank you very much for those recommendations. I really enjoyed how you started with just tuning in, because it's so easy to say, there's all this big system, this is so hard for me to get into, but it really all starts with that first step, that first engagement. And I like how you outline all the different things that we can do in order to get engaged, which I think can make it seem a lot less daunting. So thank you for that. The next question is a little simpler. So what do you enjoy most about your ministerial role?
I just enjoy talking to people and getting different perspectives. As a minister, we're really responsible for executing the policy goals of the various ministries, and being able to work firsthand and shape policy has been a very satisfying experience for me. It's really the first time that I've taken on these complex pieces of education policy. I've looked at other policies previously as a lawyer, but in terms of looking at education more in depth, and how do we build out our sports tourism models. And it's a very intellectual exercise, but one that I enjoy quite a bit. And I know that if you're interested in policy, it'll be something that anybody would enjoy about being a minister.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us, because I think it's easy to just look at the political platforms and look at the fancy speeches and see that, and that's politics. So thank you for sharing a little bit more about the policies. So next question is the opposite of that question. What do you enjoy least about your ministerial role?
Are we on camera? Can people see me? What do I enjoy least about my ministerial role? I wouldn't say I enjoy it the least. I just say that it is something that is very challenging to manage. And that is because I am a parliamentarian as well as a minister. There is the challenge of balancing your time spent dealing with legislation and your time spent dealing with the policy parts. And that can really take up your time of actually getting on the streets and talking to your constituents, because ministerial work is, it involves you talking to regional and international bodies about best practices in education or social development, youth and culture. And you can get very wrapped up in the technical parts of it. And even though you're doing it to advance your country, what has gotten you into this place to represent your country is being out there with your people, speaking to your constituents. And so the time demands of functioning very effectively as a minister and functioning very effectively as a representative can be very challenging to balance. So it does sometimes take away some of the time I would have speaking to my constituents, but I'm getting a better balance for it as time goes by.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us, especially looking at the fact that we always have to look at things as, like you said, with gender discrimination as multidimensional. So it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and looking at the difficult side to it as well. And I love how you touched on the fact that the constituents are truly the reason why you are there. And even as you try to advance your career and advance your country, that you can't leave behind the people that helped you get into the situation from the start, which I think is really important for all of us, especially the Pink Parliamentarians, to remember. So this is the final prepared question before we open the floor to the other Pink Parliamentarians and then the general audience. So before being elected to Parliament, you said that if elected, you would work to eliminate corruption in Anguilla. You have also stated that Anguilla needed a shift in its type of politicians. What qualities do you think young leaders should exhibit as politicians?
I think it's very important for young leaders to hold very strongly to their moral compass. So it can be very easy, and I think it's something that happens more frequently. I'm not saying that it happens to all, but it might happen more frequently when you're in the system for a very long time. It's very easy to become jaded, to lose faith in your people, or to feel as though there is, you've seen it all. So it's important for young leaders never to be daunted and deterred by sometimes the more set in stone thought patterns that they might come upon when they get into elected office. And so in doing so, you will shift the baseline. You, by being as unapologetic about your goals, to be unapologetic in how you achieve them, and by holding very strongly to your moral compass, I think that will allow you to demonstrate to your people that you're serious and that you have integrity. And to me, integrity is determined by your actions. So whatever you're doing as a young leader, so that you don't get painted with the same broad brush. And it is a challenge, because even when you come into a field that has been in operation for decades and centuries before you, you can be easily categorized like everyone else. So you have to work, and this is the challenge for young leaders. They have to work doubly as hard to ensure that their reputations are maintained, and that they stand strongly by the words they've said on the campaign. I've said it before that being a politician and campaigning for me was about trying to address the apathy I saw in a lot of young people. Young people did not want to come out and vote because they didn't believe in their politicians. And that's because, they will commonly say anything to get elected and then depart from that very quickly. And if you want to re-inspire your people and to give them hope, you have to stand by your word, regardless of how difficult it may be. And realize, even during the campaigning process, that you cannot say things just to get elected. And yes, I know that I'll come upon a lot of persons who will say, then you don't want to get elected, because you'll always end up saying something that you don't necessarily believe in fully, just to appease your constituents. But I will say that if you approach even the campaigning process with integrity, it makes it a lot easier for you, because if you don't feel comfortable with a specific topic, it's okay to say, I don't feel comfortable, and to let your electorate decide, because politicians aren't supposed to have the answers for everything. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of politicians make. They make the mistake of thinking they have to have a response to everything, and that's not true. So, like I said, hold strong to your values, and do your best. You will be challenged. That is the nature of politics. You will be challenged, and you have to make whatever decision you have to do in the best interest of the country.
Thank you for, as you described it, saying that young leaders have to work doubly as hard, that they have to fight those internal challenges, the societal challenges, and those societal beliefs that people have about politicians, because of people that, like you said, would have said anything just to get elected. I like that you spoke again about integrity, almost echoing what you said earlier about the importance of the individuality when you enter politics and what you can bring as yourself. So I think that's very important for all of us that are watching, that are young leaders and hoping to create change in our countries, to remember the importance of integrity and remaining firm in our values while affirming them all the time so that people can know that they can trust us and feel passionate and trust their leaders. So this is the end of the prepared interview questions where we open the floor. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for answering my questions. I'm very grateful for your responses. I think that they were very helpful and insightful for all of us here. So now that I'm opening the floor, if you want to ask a question, this is the other pink parliamentarians, you can indicate so by using the raise hand feature right now, and I will direct the question. Okay, so right off the bat, we have a question coming from Donalisa. So Donalisa, you can go ahead.
Good night. My name is Donalisa Yerwin, and I'm a current member of Pink Parliament in this year's cohort. My member to you, Minister. As Minister of Education in Anguilla, what do you believe are strategies that can be used in the education system to encourage youth leadership and more specifically, female leadership in politics and other career paths as well?
Thank you for that question, Donalisa. Very good question. And of course, the education system is the seed by which our young people grow and believe that they are capable of holding political office. Some of the mechanisms that have been used historically to sensitize young people to the possibility of taking up office as parliamentarians has been using the PSHE curriculum to bring in politicians and other business persons to speak to classes about their experience. Now, I believe that this particular method of exposing young people to parliamentarians to believe that they can take office has been useful to a certain extent, but of course it has to be reflected at the top of the pyramid as well. Other than the PSHE curriculum, which we can use maybe to specifically look at our young female students, I think what we also can do is really partner with our regional organizations and institutions, for instance, like the Pink Parliament, and to broaden their span across all the Caribbean territories so that the experience of being a female parliamentarian is something that everyone can experience if they choose to do so. And I say that because we don't always have to duplicate our efforts. We have a regional organization. We have an organization that's doing quite a bit in terms of exposing young women to their roles and young girls to their ability to be parliamentarians. And I don't see why that can't be duplicated in islands and within the education systems across the Caribbean region.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Okay, so any other questions from the other girls? Okay, so Donalisa has another question, so she can go again.
Okay, so this question may not be necessarily related to female leadership or youth leadership in politics, but my question to you, Minister, what are your views on technological improvement in education? This includes the inclusion of iPads and various forms of technology as a part of everyday learning.
Thank you, Donalisa. I think everyone is beating the horse dead at this point, emphasizing that technology is a very important part of education and learning, especially as we try to prepare our children for the jobs of the 21st century and the jobs of the future, which of course we don't know what those are yet because they're still unknown to us. But having the skills is what's most important. So even as we look at including iPads and interactive boards within the classroom settings to see how we engage students, I always say that it's more important to focus on whether or not our students are being engaged by these tools and therefore able to learn better, or these tools are simply being used in the classroom to push content in the same manner in which it was done traditionally. And what I mean by that is I can have a phone and you can send me an English lesson, and I can do the English lesson on my phone the same way I was doing the English lesson in a book. Now, does that mean that I am using technology? Yes, but am I being engaged differently by the use of technology? The answer is no. So it's important for us to ensure that when we're using technology, it's not simply a way of pushing traditional content. It's also a way of engaging specifically with that technology as a means of increasing student engagement with the content. And allowing students to be more comfortable with technological devices as a means of building skills.
I don't know if there are any more questions coming from Pink Parliamentarians. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay, I have a question here that came from YouTube. Great discussion, loving these points. Minister, do you get any negative comments on social media or pressure in political circles about your appearance and how you carry yourself? And how, it's a curious question.
That's a good question. Sometimes that happened definitely in my early days of in office. Of course, I consider myself very much to still be a young person. I'm in my 20s, and that means that I do engage in activities that a lot of politicians traditionally did not or do not engage in. So I go out with my friends. You will find me on the beach on a Sunday in a bikini. You will find me running around for treasure hunts with my friends when they put them on. So I do engage in a lot of activities that are not traditionally attached to politicians because they usually are a little older and their interests are very different to mine. So of course, I got some questions about my attire, whether or not as a minister, as a politician, I should be wearing a bikini or I should be have any pictures in a bikini. And one of the things that I commonly tell persons who ask me those questions is, I have never heard anybody ask a man if he should wear trunks to the beach. Never.
Correct. That's a curious question, I thought.
Never heard it. But I understand that for a lot of people, just generally in the whole world, there's a lot more attached to the female body, a lot more stereotypes attached to the female body. And I've never been uncomfortable with my body. I was in a Queen show where I had to walk on a stage in front of billions of people, in fact, in a bikini. And some people will say, of course, that maybe I've heard the comments about, why would you do that? Why would you parade in a bikini? And it's never about other people, it's about me. So I never cared. And that sentiment continues to this day because I am the only person who has authority and control over my body, and what people say about it really doesn't matter to me. And I've gotten to that point after getting over the comments, because I've had comments, but I've gotten over them, and I've learned to just be confident and satisfied in my own body, because the only person who's answering to Jesus is me on my own behalf.
Correct. That's a lovely answer. I appreciate that. There's a comment from Facebook. Youth leadership will continue to rise and fall with the times. I commend those seeking to actively engage young people in leadership, including politics, and of course, the youth taking on the challenge. So that's a good right there.
Okay, So we have another question coming from Pink Parliamentarian. So Shadi has a question. So Shadi can go ahead.
Hello, good night. I really don't have a question. I just wanted to thank the minister for that response and just make a few brief comments if I am allowed to. I just want to say, Minister, thank you so much for the way that you answered that question because it's very significant. It's really, really great for like persons coming up and young girls coming up, you know, in politics to really understand that, you know, you have to stand in your truth. You have to be confident. There's going to be negative comments, but you're at the end of the day, you're a person and you're not supposed to like shut off being who you are just because you want to serve. And I think that is very, 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 very significant and important for persons to understand. So again, thank you, Minister, so much for being you and just, you know, continue to do what you're doing and you're doing a great job. So that's all I can say.
Thank you, Shadi. I agree with you completely. Great sentiments. Well spoken.
Thank you, Shadi. So now we're going to Renice. I really hope I said that right. And if I said it wrong, I'm very sorry.
That's no problem. You pronounce it correctly. It's Bernice. I also would like to double the words of Shadi. I wholeheartedly agree that it was an excellent answer to the question because I myself, I had a similar question in mind, but I thought that one of the questions that you would have asked her with how she balanced pageantry and being a young person in politics, that would have been the extent to which she may have answered the question. So I didn't bother to ask mine. Because I am a student of international relations. I'm in my third year right now at UWI Cave Hill. And I also work during the day and I do a bit of accounting for a local gas station. And I also do a bit of modeling on the side. Now, my appearance is always a topic of discussion in most professional settings. And it kind of gets annoying because I know that what's in my head is a lot more valuable than what's on my face. So I am oftentimes peeved when people sometimes doubt my abilities based on how I look. But I've gotten to a point where I just try to tell myself that, you know, my work should speak for itself. So seeing that I was also a pageant person. And so I didn't compete in many pageants. So people don't really know me for that. They just know me for the modeling. So having the opportunity to hear you speak about your transition through pageantry, sportsmanship, and now in politics was very reassuring to hear. So thank you so much.
No problem, Renice. I agree with you completely. And I'd say, again, as Shadi said, stand in your truth. A lot of people are going to try to discount you because it's easier to do that than to acknowledge the power that you have. It's much easier.
Mhm. Definitely.
Thank you. So now we have a question coming from Regina.
Good night. My question is, do you think the breaking of barriers of young people in politics begin with education reform and especially in early childhood?
Regina, thank you. You actually are quite on target with a lot of academic thought at the moment, which is that early childhood education is the key to empowering young people on a lifetime basis because it is the foundation upon which all other educational pursuits are built. And if we're going to identify anything and be able to address it, it's during the early childhood education stage. So I would have to agree with you. Early childhood education, which is one thing that the ministry in Anguilla is looking to see, how do we tie that in closer to childhood education. Currently, childhood education, education is guaranteed between the ages of 5 and 17 under the Education Act of Anguilla, but we are looking to see how we include pre-primary into that category so that we allow our young people to get the chance of getting a very good foundation. So I agree with you. Pre-primary is very instrumental in building the success of our young people to break barriers.
Thank you. So now I'm looking, do we have any more questions? So do any of the girls have any more questions?
We have a comment, another comment that I'd like to read while we wait. Any of the other girls would like to ask a question? Just a comment from Maria Fontanelle. Kudos to the leaders in countries like Barbados and St. Lucia that nurture young people into positions of influence. Definitely. Very good point. The youth gap in leadership is so visible, you know, and when we do see young women or men in positions of leadership, it's clear that youth it should not be a barrier. They bring so much to the table that I think we do need in this time, for sure, you know. I'm just so refreshed to see it all the time. I love to see it, love to see it.
Yeah, same here. I think it's really important for young people to be heard in this environment, and more than being heard. And what I encourage every young person, when they are asked to join political office, when they are asked to run with a party, to ensure that you ask whether or not you're being used as a token. Because I am an advocate against using young people as tokens to cross the line and just to say, oh, we have a young person here. I'm a very strong advocate against it. And I would always advise young people against being handled in that manner. And when they come to the table, know that you are the most valuable table. You are the most valuable voice at that table. You are the most valuable voice at that table, because the generations will continue to turn, and you will have to continue to, they'll have to continue to stay relevant, to be connected to the people, and young people are usually that bridge. So.
Very true. Any last questions before we close, ladies? No? We're
I'm not
doing well.
seeing any more hands.
No, we're doing well for time, and I think we got a good set of questions. So all in all, I really think we had a very engaging discussion, and we definitely learned a lot. Minister Cantis Rogers, we can't appreciate the time you have spent with us. We can't really put any value on it. It's really been amazing and wonderful, and we value the time that you've taken. We know you're busy, so we value the time that you have taken to come and speak with us this evening and touch on such engaging points and answer the insightful questions that Ayanna asked. I must say, Ayanna, you really had some good questions prepared. Well done on your part. And thank you so much also from the questions from Renice, Regina, and Donna, Lisa, and Shade. Thank you as well for the engagement. And we're pretty much at the end of our conversation, the fourth cross-country dialogue. And it's been a wonderful evening, and we hope that it won't be the last time that we will be seeing Minister Cantis Rogers. That please, ladies, if you're not following her on IG, please do so by tomorrow. So you can continue to be inspired. And Minister, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. We appreciate your presence.
Thank you so
much. Of your evening.
Thank you, Ayanna. You've been a wonderful moderator, and thank you to the Pink Parliament for having me. Regina, Renice, Donna, Lisa, Shade, I can see the future is very, very bright in you young ladies, and I'm looking forward to following your careers as you advance. So let me know. Women will rule the Caribbean very soon, so keep me up to date.
Yes, we shall. And thanks everyone who came on board. Thank you so much to UA Open Campus Marketing and Communications team for making this possible. And see you all once again, and hopefully see you face to face sometime. Good evening and bye-bye.
Okay.